Good afternoon. It's Friday the 13th of February 2015. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host this afternoon, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, Mike Robinson. Behind the technical desk is Nick Green. I'm not sure what the weather is, actually. I'm going to say that live on air. What I remember driving in is that it was pouring down with rain and warm. Wet and warm here in Plymouth.
And windy.
And windy. And we think that's about it for the rest of the country. So if you're enjoying sunshine at the moment, do let us know. Well, we're going to kick off with a look through the country. We've got a special report from north of the border with David Scott. Everything that's coming into the UK Column News studio at the moment, I have to say, is very disturbing reports of basically a breakdown in democracy. Let's start off with the fact that child abuse victim Melanie Shaw, we can now confirm, is back in the private Peterborough prison. And how did she get there? Well, we understand that Nottingham police a few days ago once again kicked their way into her home. She was arrested. We don't know what the charges were, but we can tell our audience today that Melanie was not charged with any breach of her probation arrangements. So this appears to be a new charge, and we're also deeply concerned that it appears Melanie Shaw has gone straight from her home to prison. We cannot find any evidence that she went through a court hearing unless that was a secret hearing. Let's remind ourselves of what Alison Saunders, the head of the Crown Prosecution, said a little while ago. She said, "For too long, society has blamed rape victims for confusing the issue of consent." To which we say, well, Ms. Saunders, Melanie Shaw didn't confuse the issue of consent. She talks about her rape from the age of 4. And this is the treatment that a vulnerable abuse victim is given. So we will publish details today of how you can get in contact with Melanie. We think it's vital that everybody who's interested in protecting children in this country should lock on to this case. We need to make it public, and we need to kick the BBC and the wider press and media into reporting what is really happening instead of what I usually term dross. And what sort of dross are the papers reporting? Well, here it is. We couldn't make it any better. The man who has been associating with young girls, what do? We promote him. The man who has boasted of his friendship with a man convicted for underage sex in America, promoted on a world stage as representing the general public of Britain. And just to make sure that it's rubbed in our faces, here he is. He's been promoted, I think, to a full vice admiral.
And of course, this is the same man who attended OCVC despite being informed of the problems at that particular school.
Oh, this is absolutely correct. Prince Andrew's PA was informed days before his planned visit to the Oxfordshire school, OCVC, Oxford and Cherwell Valley College. And he was informed of serious concerns about child abuse at that college. Nevertheless, the visit went ahead, and indeed he was photographed in the very workshop where some of the abuses had taken place. These people simply don't care, Mike.
No.
And these are the people that, of course, Britain's military, formerly myself included, were supposed to serve with great respect and reverence. Love of money is the root of all evil, so I suppose it's over to you.
Yeah, indeed. So here we are, Mark Carnage, speaking yesterday about interest rates, having said for quite some time now that they won't fall below the current 0.5%. He's apparently changed his mind. Apparently that's really good news, and particularly according to the Times here, boom times ahead, in the sense of a nuclear explosion perhaps. So families will feel richer, according to the Times. Families will feel richer this year than they've done for more than a decade as spending powers soar, the Bank of England declared yesterday, and that's according to the Times. So what a load of nonsense. Signalling an abrupt end to the 6-year decline in living standards, Mark Carney predicted that households' disposable income would rise at its fastest rate since 2001, they go on to say. Maybe it will, but as we can see from this graph, and if you look at the graph, the red line is showing pay growth, or pay collapse rather, and the black line showing inflation. So pay growth has been below inflation since 2009, and because of a couple of months of lower inflation, all's well, according to the Bank of England and according to Mark Carney. So what this graph shows quite clearly is that there's no improvement in the pay growth situation, really, since it's well below its 4% levels of pre-2008. So we're still nothing to write home about. The only thing that makes a difference is the collapse in fuel prices, which means inflation has fallen, and also the fact that people aren't really buying too much at the moment, so prices are generally falling. So what we're seeing here, complete economic collapse, not growth. We're seeing jobs not being filled when people are leaving companies, and we understand that Tesco is one such case where people are leaving their jobs and basically aren't being replaced. And we're seeing the rise in the number of people forced into self-employment. And they're, as we've covered a couple of times this week, they're not really making a living doing that. So it's really utterly ridiculous to suggest that we're seeing improving living standards, but don't worry, because it's only temporary. This is temporary, according to Carnage. It's an important point. 2/3 of this has been from falls in food and energy prices. Enjoy it while it lasts, because this will go away over the course of the next year. So good. Don't worry, interest rates rises are on their way, right, despite the short-term fall.
Okay, well, I'm just going to be a bit direct here and say this man actually is a Canadian, am I correct?
Yes.
So we've got the nation's economy in the hands of somebody whose allegiance actually is to another country, however friendly we think Canada is. So this is an interesting aspect on the supranational and the one world state, where we have a Canadian simply dictating to British families how their life is going to be. And do you think he's not quite telling the truth, Mike? Is that how you put it?
I couldn't, well...
I've caught you live on camera there. We'll laugh at that. We'll leave the question hanging in the air. Yeah. Well, back onto the reality of life in David Cameron's Conservative Britain in 2015. And what better way to go than to remind ourselves that brave child abuse campaigner Robert Greene, who is still effectively under house arrest, having to report to the police every day. I think the total now is up to about 270 days that this man has been under these, quote, draconian bail conditions. His crime, nothing but trying to protect children. Well, we'll remind ourselves that Robert is due in Aberdeen Court on the 4th of March for sentencing him. And supporters are, of course, continuing to highlight the fact that charges against him have been dropped. The more serious charges against him have been dropped, which makes the fact this man has been imprisoned twice and held under house arrest even more bizarre. But a letter sent into the Scottish Crown Office we think is particularly good. We'll make this available on the website for people to read, or you can freeze the frame here. But the letter, which is an open letter, says it's disturbing to see that despite ample proof to the contrary, you persist in the discredited assertion that historical allegations of sexual abuse made by Holly Gregg have been investigated by Grampian Police and the local Procurator Fiscal. This, of course, is due to the fact that the police did not investigate those allegations. And the second paragraph begins with a very hard-hitting, the cavalier way in which well-substantiated allegations of violent rape inflicted by the individuals in positions of authority on helpless children have been consistently dismissed by the Scottish legal and political establishment, compared with their eagerness in launching cross-border raids to seize, imprison and curtail the freedom of Robert Greene. A really fantastic letter which cuts right to the core about the Scottish state's handling of Robert Greene. And with that, we'll bring in David Scott. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. And just give us a little bit of an update on Robert Greene, if you will.
Yes, good afternoon. Robert is preparing for his sentencing, doesn't know really what's going to transpire. All the logical conclusion would be that he wouldn't see any more jail time, but with the way he's been treated up until now, no one knows. Robert certainly doesn't. We are seeing a large number of supporters all around the country sending in, as you see, very well-written letters, tightly arguing the problems of Robert's case and the failures of the Scottish legal establishment. and we're getting 2-paragraph boilerplate text with the same wooden repetition of there's been a full investigation repeated over and over again. They don't answer any of the questions. They can't answer any of the questions. They're just trying to stonewall.
Well, that is absolutely the case. Thank you for that. Perhaps if we put the next slide up, people may understand what's really going on north of the border. And here it is, a headline from Mr. Chirby, if I'm correct. And it's an article about Scottish legal firms fiddling a poll on how popular they were. So I think the result was they were trying to say they were very popular, whilst most people in Scotland knows that there's rot at the heart of the legal system. What's your take on it, David?
Yes, we're seeing there's a merry-go-round in legal regulators. The various complaints, Scottish Legal Complaints Commission, the Information Commissioner, the same people head up these organisations, legal ombudsman and such like. So they move round. There doesn't seem to be any fresh thinking or clear thinking in any of the regulators. The regulators have been captured really by the legal profession, and you're not seeing problems addressed. They just grow and grow and grow. And no amount of PR spin is going to convince people otherwise. Peter Chirby, whose blog that is, has championed the call through the Scottish Parliament for a register of judges' interests, financial interests. And at the moment, the judges are judges led by Lord President Gill are very determinedly against having any disclosure of their financial interests.
It's really quite surprising there isn't such a register already.
Yes, very. You would have thought that would have been a fundamental matter of clarity in any open society, but not in Scotland, unfortunately.
Well, many people, including I know yourself, getting deeply concerned with the way Scotland is going. Let's have a look at this one. This is the BBC putting spin on what I regard as one of the most dangerous things that we've come across in the last few months. So Police Scotland, remember, a single police force for the whole of Scotland now, and they want new child search powers. But look at the statistics. They're talking about 640,000 searches recorded by Police Scotland in its first year, and then 200,000 it's talking about 40% of those involved with the under 18s. And then the BBC casually says, well, these were consensual stop searches of under 12. I ask, how does somebody who's under 12 properly consent in terms of the law to being searched by the police? David, it looks as though there's a dictatorship coming very quickly north of the border. Is that just a mistaken Englishman's view?
No, there's a lot of concern over this. The idea that someone who's below the age of consent can give consent, coming from Police Scotland, coming from the Chief Constable of Police Scotland, who has defended this practice and says it's essential to maintaining law and order because otherwise we'll be overrun with violent, drunken 12-year-olds. It's just ridiculous. I mean, surely if anybody should know what legal consent means, it should be the Chief Constable of Police Scotland. Now, this was raised in Parliament. The Police Scotland gave an undertaking to stop this practice, and what then happened was the frequency of this practice increased. So there was more consensual searches of 10 and 12-year-olds. It was raised in Parliament again, and the First Minister made an announcement that she'd spoken to the Chief Constable, and the Chief Constable was going to think about this and decide what to do. So the law is being decided in this matter by the police, not by Parliament, and not certainly by the common law, which is, of course, jury made.
And I think the audience should be aware that, of course, we've got the same procedures now coming south of the border, in that ACPO, a private company comprised of senior police officers, is setting policy. It's saying what police are going to do and are not going to do. There's some big changes coming shortly. I think the 1st of April, we're going to see ACPO become a new body. We're going to see Sarah Thornton the present Chief Constable of Thames Valley Police. Remember, that was the police force that absolutely failed to grip the investigation of child abuse at Oxford and Cherwell Valley College. But that woman is now going to be in charge of yet another body, totally unaccountable to the public, setting police policy in England. It's frightening the speed this is unfolding, actually. Right, let's have a look at this. We've got a little cluster of articles then taken from the press north of the border. So we've got the Scotsman here saying opponents of the named person policy are set to appeal. We've got ID cards coming in by the back door. That's particularly interesting. We've got the Daily Record pointing out that a solicitor, it's alleged he's involved in an £18,000 fraud. He's slipped off to Italy. And we've got this other one, which is fascinating. Keep calm. Tuesday is Soylent Green Day. So, David, explain to us a little bit about those, if you can.
Yeah, so starting with the named person, the named person, no to named person campaigns request for judicial review failed on all counts. Judge Pentland found against them in all regards, and they felt it was a very poor judgment and there was great grounds for appeal. Since this announcement from the judge, the government guidance document has been published, which we were told would make all of our concerns go away, that a state-appointed guardian wasn't really a threat to civil liberty and family life, and it was only our nasty, suspicious minds that were inventing this problem. So the government guidance document came out, 109 pages of indecipherable gobbledygook, legalese and politically correct nonsense that says nothing, that clarifies nothing, and so the appeal has gone in. The original decision was very largely based on the fact that the guidance documents hadn't been produced and that it was too early for the judge to be deciding against the legislation because it hadn't sort of revealed itself yet. So the appeal went in, and that's to now 3 judges in the Court of Session, which is the Supreme Civil Court in Scotland.
Right. And what about the ID cards then?
Yes, ID cards, this has been bubbling under for some years and no one's really noticed. It's based on the NHS records. So your NHS medical records are being used as the core of essentially an ID card system. So everyone in Scotland has a UCRN, a unique citizens reference number. And every property in Scotland has a unique property reference number. And they're using the NHS records to tie this up. Now, what's currently out for consultation is they're going to extend the access to this information to 120 other government, non-governmental, charity and related bodies. So if you're going to access any services of any sort from any of these bodies, you'll need to have your unique citizens reference number, you'll need to have your government ID card. So it's been started off with the NHS, it's moving out so that any interaction with the government will need this reference number, and they'll be able to plot you and your property so they'll know exactly who you are and where you are. The list is of these 120 government bodies who'll get this information is a very long one, and there's some very strange things in. Why Visit Scotland, the tourist board, needs my information, I'm not quite sure. The tax authorities are in there, not sure I'm feeling particularly relaxed about that. And Quality Meat Scotland apparently need to know from the NHS who I am and where I am. The only explanation I can offer for that is that Soylent Green is in fact people.
Right, so I was going to make a joke of that and say they're obviously got you lined up for sausages, but probably it would be haggis north of the border.
Well, it would be, but I think that's sheep. I hope it's sheep.
You're obviously safe then. We're making light of it, but this is very, very sinister because, of course, this is the surveillance state with ID cards, with biometrics being brought in with stealth. We'll leave the allegations about that Scottish lawyer to one side. We'll cover that another time. Let's stick on the important stuff here, and we just bring on screen. This is where it's heading in Scotland. Now, we've got a One Scotland ID card with, I think that's George Orwell on it. So this is taking a look into the future. But on the right, on the screen at the moment for viewers, is Chapter 7 of the Justice, Security and Home Affairs document. I'm bringing in just a bit of the Daily Mail headline from a few days ago. It was talking about the Tartan Stalinists, the forced sale of country estates, snooping guardians on every child, contempt for the wealthy, and they're pointing to the SNP. If I bring in a bit of the documentation, it's saying this will be a modern, fit-for-purpose security and intelligence agency investigating threats, liaising with Police Scotland, intelligence gathering, intelligence material assessment, protection of Scotland's critical infrastructure. This was a document talking about a new intelligence organisation for Scotland.
That's correct, yes. This was part of the white paper, which was put out before the referendum to explain what a new Scotland, an independent Scotland, would be like. So this particular part was talking about our version of MI5, MI6. And the graphic they used is very interesting. And this was Schoolhouse, the homeschooling organisation, spotted this as they're campaigning against the named person provision. The graphic shows confidential information being held by the government, fingerprint information being held by the government, and everyone having an ID card number. So that's obviously the sort of Scotland they had in mind. And that's why a lot of people voted no.
Right, well, I'm just going to move through a couple of items quickly so that we can get on to other matters. We've got Scottish ministers above the law. This is fascinating. This is a judgment by a judge against Scottish ministers for contempt of court. So he says, yes, they're guilty of contempt of court, but then says, I agree that no penalty should be imposed. The finding of contempt of court against the Scottish ministers is itself sufficient to mark the gravity of the failure. So we can see here Scottish ministers above the law, which of course is exactly what Robert Greene says. And then let's have a look at this. The two Lanarkshire councillors have quit the SNP. And what are they saying? They're alarmed by the climate of fear, intimidation and false allegations which operates within the SNP locally. But contrast that with what Alex Salmond has been up to, because he is now a Bollywood soap opera star. So he's got his priorities there. But if we come south of the border, well, it's obviously election time, because here's Gary Streeter, Southwest Devon MP. He was the man who wanted to get the bombs going into Syria. A lot of support from the man in his underpants, Brooks Newmark. So Gary is now hitting the streets to do with mental health. It's the madness of election time. And I think we've got a video that's somewhere along the lines.
Indeed. So, of course, the conference at the end of the month, we're just going to play out the little advertisement for that, and we'll see you in about 40 seconds, I think.
It's the time for action. The UK Column and the British Constitution Group present their Spring Conference 2015. The networking starts Friday evening, 27th of February, running to late Sunday evening, 1st of March, at the Park in Telford, Shropshire. On-site accommodation available at special rates. Visit www.events.gb.com now and grab your tickets. UKC and BCG members, check your own websites for discount rates. Go on, do it now. This really is the time for action.
I think we can't really stress enough how important it is for people to get along to this conference. We want the room absolutely full. So please book your tickets today. Really is the point we want to make. Rooms are going fast, so you need to get booked ASAP.
And the idea is to bring people from all different parts of the country together, and also people who are doing great work in different subject areas. So if you're interested in the courts, be there. If you're interested in child abuse, be there. If you're interested in the election and the setting up of Britain's first dictatorship under a super rainbow coalition be there?
Right, so obviously getting people organised for the election is part of what this is about. And here we've got the Financial Times talking about the latest poll. This is from Populus. I mean, these polls are just extremely important for the party leaders in particular, because they're engineering a rainbow coalition and they need to make sure that no one gets too far ahead. So as an example of this, well, another opinion poll puts Labour 3 points ahead. So today comes the story of Ed Miliband allegedly evading tax, which of course he's vehemently denying, just in time to make sure that no momentum can be built behind the Labour Party. So anyway, getting back to this Populus poll in the FT, Populus have worked with Hanover, according to the FT, who's a PR firm, to create what they're calling an outcome predictor, combining national polling data with constituency level polls. This is the pie chart that they have created. As you can see, it shows a number of possible outcomes for the election and the percentage chance that any one of these outcomes is going to take place. And what they're saying is, if you add up all the scenarios that include the SNP, for example, that they then have a 42% chance of being part of a coalition come the general election. Rick Nye, who's the managing director of Populus, is quoted in the FT here as saying, in a week when some of the minor parties have been naming their price for entering a coalition, the Populus Hanover predictor shows a two-thirds chance that there will be 100 or more non-Labour and non-Conservative MPs in Parliament after the general election for the first time in more than 90 years. So that's a pretty interesting situation. Lots of backbenchers and really not much chance of anybody getting any jobs done after the election. But what's also interesting about Populus themselves is that they posted this little blog post a couple of days ago saying that it's very likely that there will be multiple elections in 2015. And of course, this ties in with what we reported earlier in the week, Brian, with Nick Clegg becoming the interim Prime Minister while all this stuff is going on. So what Populus here believe is that the outcome of the election will be so indeterminate that no government can be formed, and we're going to end up with multiple general elections.
Multiple general elections to keep the British public focused on chaos politically. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, the dictatorship is set up. And have you got more to add on that?
No,
right, I'll bring this one in. This is the reality of what's going on, unseen to the public. So here we've got the Defence Secretary. He's over with the French and he's discussing the common purpose. Here they are, the common goals being discussed. This is tighter integration of the British Armed Forces with the French. And of course, the excuse that's being used at the moment is Russian aggression. Putin's aggression, Russian aggression, Russian aggression. I'll say that again because the BBC would like me to. Russian aggression means that we have to lock Britain's armed forces into tighter control under the European Union. And I'll just add to that slide the important question, were these plans ever discussed in Parliament? Well, the answer, of course, is no. This was all decided before David Cameron came into power at the home of the French ambassador in Paris when the strategic defence review was underway. So stealth is driving political policy in this country. And if you wanted to see where it's leading on the grounds, have a look at the headlines from our local paper, the Plymouth Herald. The BBC is quoted in this article promoting super councils, and the Plymouth City Council and Torbay Council are saying to the government, we need to have more powers, give us more powers to raise taxes. We want to help local people, give us more power and money, give us more power. And let's have a look. Here's the quote. We call for a new funding regime that increases our independence from central government by giving us direct control over the local funding pot and allowing us to retain a greater proportion of income raised locally, and ever fewer unaccountable people controlling our lives. And if I'm not mistaken, I think that building was at one stage the home of Common Purpose Plymouth.
Is that Ballard House?
I think it's Ballard House.
They're still in there.
They're still in there, are they? Well, of course, we've just seen Plymouth Civic Centre sold, public infrastructure, but the public hasn't been told any detail of that sale. But here we are, the new offices appear to be linked to Common Purpose. And
complete change of subject.
Complete change of subject. It threw me. Here we are.
Yes. Okay. So this is the National Research Council in the States. Climate intervention is not a replacement for reducing carbon emissions. Proposed intervention techniques not ready for wide-scale deployment. And what they're really talking about is what they're calling albedo modification research. So this is technology which prevents sunlight from reaching the Earth's surface. And they're saying that this could reduce average global temperatures within a few years, similar to the effects of large-scale volcanic eruptions. But while these techniques have been proposed, they're saying that they have a significant impact, and it's really untested and pretty dangerous thing to do. And so they're decrying the injection of aerosols into the stratosphere, as they're describing it, and marine cloud brightening. And they say that they also say that albedo modification research will have legal, ethical, social, political, and economic ramifications. The committee recommends the initiation of a serious deliberative process to examine what international research governance structures may be needed beyond those that already exist, and what types of research should require such governance. The degree and nature of governance should vary by activity and the associated risks, and should involve civil society in decision-making through a transparent and open process. Remind me what civil society is. We're talking about charity sector, the third sector.
We're talking about big society, the third sector, the third way, and this is communitarianism by stealth, as put forward, of course, by Tony Blair.
But nonetheless, they're absolutely warning about the dangers of this rejection of sunlight, and saying, well, I listed the legal, ethical, social, political, and economic ramifications, which haven't been considered and they believe should be.
Indeed. Well, David, we'll just give you 30 seconds on any subject you like. Then we've got a couple of announcements and be time to end the show.
Well, coalition government. When I was growing up, politics were quite simple. We had a two-party system. One party was stupid and the other party was evil. And coalition government is a new thing. It's both stupid and evil. And we're going to see lots of it, I think.
Yeah.
Unless we withdraw our consent. Comment on a very serious child abuse case that's been happening over a number of months. It relates to the district Northwest 2 in London. 2 young children have been on camera reporting the abuse that they have suffered. Within 24 hours, those children taken from their mother by the local social services. Mother's access then restricted. Those accused of abuse allowed contact. And the police, we know, had certain police officers threatened. People who tried to get out information of this case were threatened. Within 7 days, the Metropolitan Police are saying that these children, 8 and 9 years old, had, quote, retracted their statements. Well, we learnt shortly before coming live today that a number of people have now been threatened via the secretive family court system. We understand that the mother has received threatening communications from the local authority legal teams. People, members of the general public trying to help in this case, have also received threatening legal letters. And it would appear that the establishment in London absolutely desperate now to close down the case where 2 young children say on camera, before there was any involvement with social services, the type of abuse that they'd suffered. So we'll report more on that next week. And finally, I'd like to end with a comment that came up at a particular event yesterday when a gentleman said he had been working to expose fraud and corruption in his local authority. I believe that was Bournemouth. And the person speaking to him said, well, I hope you're not going to take any walks on high ground. Now, the person was a friend, that wasn't a threat, but this is the state of David Cameron's Britain when those telling the truth about child abuse, fraud and corruption are being warned by other members of the public to take care. We couldn't put it over more simply than that, really.
No.
Thanks for joining us. Do have a look at the British Constitution Group conference. We need you there. Your country needs you. We'll see you Monday, same time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.